There are moments in the history of the British royal family when a single headline captures the attention of millions around the world. Sometimes it is a royal wedding. Sometimes it is the birth of a future heir. And sometimes, it is a disagreement that reveals just how complicated life can become behind the walls of one of the world's oldest institutions. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This week, attention turned once again to Prince Harry's return to the United Kingdom. What was expected to be a visit focused on his charitable work quickly became overshadowed by a disagreement over something that, at first glance, seemed surprisingly simple: where would the Duke of Sussex spend the night? The answer depends on who you ask. Buckingham Palace and Prince Harry's representatives have offered different accounts of what happened. According to the palace, accommodation at a royal residence was offered, but confirmation did not arrive in time. By the time Harry's team accepted, officials say the necessary arrangements and staffing could no longer be made. Prince Harry's spokesperson, however, said the accommodation had already been accepted and that the offer was later withdrawn, describing the decision as disappointing. Neither version has been independently confirmed beyond those official statements, leaving royal observers with two competing narratives and very few definitive answers. Yet this story is about far more than a single overnight stay. To understand why this disagreement has generated headlines across the world, it's necessary to go back several years, to a period when the modern British monarchy faced one of its most dramatic turning points. In 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, announced they would step back as senior working members of the royal family. Their decision marked a historic break from royal tradition and led to a series of changes affecting their public roles, finances, official duties, and security arrangements. The couple eventually settled in California, where they began building a new life with their children while continuing charitable and commercial projects. Since then, every return Harry has made to Britain has attracted intense public interest. Visits that might once have passed quietly now become major news stories. Questions about family relationships, security, public appearances, and private meetings dominate headlines long before his plane even lands. This latest visit was originally expected to highlight causes that have remained central to Harry's public life. Among them is the Invictus Games, the international sporting event he founded for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women. Since its creation, the competition has become one of his most widely praised achievements, bringing together competitors from around the world while drawing attention to recovery, resilience, and community. Supporters hoped the visit would keep the focus on veterans in the upcoming games. Instead, public discussion shifted almost immediately toward reports of the accommodation dispute. The timing only added to the intrigue. Harry's visit also coincided with developments in one of his ongoing legal disputes involving the British press. Although Buckingham Palace has not commented publicly on legal strategy, reports suggested there were concerns about the public perception of a senior royal staying at a royal residence while court developments were unfolding. Harry's representatives rejected suggestions that the court case should have affected accommodation plans, insisting the relevant timetable was already known in advance. As the differing explanations emerged, commentators quickly pointed to a larger issue that has followed the relationship between Prince Harry and the palace for years: trust. For many royal observers, the contrasting statements were not simply about logistics. Instead, they reflected a relationship that has become increasingly strained since Harry and Meghan stepped back from official duties. Public interviews, documentaries, books, and legal cases have all contributed to an atmosphere in which even routine arrangements can become the subject of intense scrutiny. At the same time, Buckingham Palace continues to balance its own responsibilities. The monarchy is expected to remain politically neutral while maintaining public confidence and preserving institutional stability. Every decision involving senior members of the royal family is viewed through that broader constitutional lens, making even seemingly minor matters highly significant. The disagreement over accommodation therefore became symbolic of something much larger. It highlighted how difficult communication appears to have become between the two sides and how quickly differing interpretations can shape the public conversation. Meanwhile, King Charles continues to carry out his constitutional duties while receiving treatment for cancer, with other senior members of the royal family taking on additional engagements as needed. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, have also continued to play prominent roles, ensuring the monarchy's public work carries on during a challenging period. Against this backdrop, any potential meeting between King Charles and Prince Harry naturally attracts worldwide attention. Such meetings are often interpreted as signs of either reconciliation or continued distance, even though the palace generally keeps private family conversations confidential. Whether this latest visit ultimately strengthens family ties or simply adds another chapter to an already complicated relationship remains uncertain. What is clear is that public fascination with the royal family shows little sign of fading. Every official statement is examined, every photograph is analyzed, and every disagreement becomes part of a much larger story about the future of one of the world's most recognizable institutions. As we continue, we'll examine how Prince Harry's relationship with the royal family evolved after 2020, why security has remained one of the central issues in his visits to Britain, and how these continuing disagreements influence public perceptions of both the Duke of Sussex and the monarchy itself. Chapter 1. The break that changed the monarchy. To really understand a dispute over a single night's accommodation, it helps to remember just how unusual the events of January 2020 were. When Harry and Meghan announced their intention to step back from royal duties, it wasn't simply a change of job description. It meant giving up official funding, giving up the use of certain royal titles in a working capacity, and, most consequentially for everything that followed, giving up the automatic, government-funded police protection that comes with being a senior working royal. That last point turned out to be the seed of nearly everything that has happened since. Within weeks of the announcement, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, known as RAVEC, ruled that Harry would no longer receive the same level of taxpayer-funded personal protection when visiting the UK from the United States. Instead, he'd be offered what the government called a bespoke arrangement, security decisions made case by case, contingent on advance notice of his travel plans. Harry did not accept that decision quietly. He filed for a judicial review in 2021, arguing that the process behind the RAVEC decision was flawed and that he hadn't been given a fair opportunity to make his case beforehand. What followed was one of the longest-running legal sagas connected to the modern royal family. The High Court dismissed his initial challenge in February 2024, ruling that the decision to change his security status was neither irrational nor procedurally unfair. Harry appealed. In May 2025, the Court of Appeal upheld that decision, with the judges concluding that Revoked's approach was lawful, and describing the outcome as, in the words of one judge, understandable and even predictable given the circumstances. Buckingham Palace's response to that final ruling was notably brief and measured, simply stating that the matter had been examined repeatedly and thoroughly by the courts, always with the same result. Harry, for his part, gave an emotional interview shortly afterward in which he spoke about wanting reconciliation with his family while also expressing frustration about how the security decision had affected his relationship with the monarchy, and how much time he felt he might have left with his father given the ongoing cancer treatment. The story didn't end there. In October 2025, following a security scare during a UK visit in which a stalker reportedly came unusually close to him on 2 separate occasions, Harry wrote directly to the Home Secretary requesting a fresh review of his arrangements. By January 2026, Revoked had, in fact, carried out a new risk assessment, though the outcome of that review has not been made public in detail. This background matters enormously for understanding the accommodation dispute, because it explains why even a routine logistical question about where Harry sleeps during a visit gets filtered through years of accumulated tension over safety, trust, and how the institution treats a family member who no longer holds an official role. Chapter 2. Small steps toward the table. Despite the legal battles, the relationship between Harry and his father has not been frozen in place. Over the past year, there have been real, verifiable signs of a thaw, even if progress has been anything but linear. In September 2025, Harry visited his father at Clarence House for a private meeting, their first face-to-face contact in well over a year. The meeting was brief, under an hour by most accounts, and Harry returned to California the following day. Neither side offered detailed comment on what was discussed, which, as with so much of this story, opened the door to competing interpretations from commentators about what the meeting did or didn't signal. The most significant moment came in July 2026, when Harry, Meghan, and their children, Archie and Lilibet, met with King Charles and Queen Camilla at Highgrove House. It marked the first time the Sussex family had gathered together with the King and Queen in 4 years, and the first time Charles had seen his grandchildren in person since 2022. Buckingham Palace confirmed the meeting took place, though, consistent with the family's general approach to privacy, no photographs were released and no details of the conversation were shared publicly. Notably, Prince William and Catherine were not present, spending that day instead at a separate public engagement. Commentators have offered differing explanations for that absence, ranging from a deliberate, strategic decision to keep a grandparent-focused visit separate from the more fraught relationship between the two brothers, to a sign that reconciliation between Harry and William remains a far more distant prospect than reconciliation between Harry and his father. Neither explanation has been confirmed on the record, and it's worth being upfront about that. When an outlet tells you definitively why William wasn't there, they are almost always relying on anonymous sourcing rather than a palace statement. In the weeks following the Highgrove meeting, several reports suggested that contact between Harry and his father slowed again once Harry returned to the United States. Whether that reflects a genuine step backward, or simply the natural, halting pace of rebuilding a relationship after years of public and legal conflict, is not something that can be determined from the outside. What we can say with confidence is that the relationship has clearly moved from years of near total estrangement toward at least occasional, private contact, even if a full reconciliation, particularly one that includes William, remains an open question. Chapter 3. The cause that keeps bringing him back. It would be a mistake to view every one of Harry's UK visits purely through the lens of family conflict. Many of his trips are built around the Invictus Games, the international sporting competition he founded in 2014 for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women. The Games have become one of the most consistently praised parts of his public life, widely credited with helping veterans find community and purpose through adaptive sport, and the competition has expanded significantly since its first edition in London. This particular visit was tied to events marking the one-year countdown to the 2027 Invictus Games in Birmingham, a milestone that Harry's team had hoped would dominate the news coverage of the trip. That the accommodation dispute overshadowed those events is, in its own way, a familiar pattern. Nearly every one of Harry's public appearances in the UK now competes for attention with questions about his family relationships, and more often than not, the family storyline wins out, regardless of what the visit was originally intended to highlight. That's frustrating for supporters of his charitable work, who point out that the Invictus Games' actual achievements, veterans finding renewed purpose through sport, tend to get relatively little airtime compared to speculation about a hotel room or a brief, undocumented conversation at Highgrove. Chapter 4. What this says about trust and coverage. Stepping back, the accommodation dispute is a useful case study in how a story with fairly modest, verifiable facts, an offer was made, confirmation was delayed, arrangements fell through, can quickly balloon into a referendum on an entire relationship. Both sides released their own version of events, both versions are plausible, and neither has been independently corroborated by a neutral third party. That's not unusual for royal reporting, but it's a good moment to notice how it works. When two institutions with a strained history each release carefully worded statements that don't quite match, audiences and commentators naturally fill in the gaps with their own assumptions, usually based on which side they're inclined to trust already. Supporters of the palace tend to read the story as evidence of Harry's team being disorganized or difficult. Supporters of Harry tend to read it as evidence of the palace being petty or unwelcoming. The reality, as is so often the case with these disputes, is probably more mundane than either narrative suggests. A logistical miscommunication between two parties who have a well-documented history of not communicating particularly well, magnified by a media environment that rewards conflict over nuance. That same dynamic runs through nearly every thread of this broader story: the security litigation, the pace of reconciliation, even the question of why William wasn't at Highgrove. In each case, there are a small number of confirmed facts, and a much larger cloud of interpretation sitting on top of them. Being a responsible viewer of this kind of coverage means being able to tell the difference. Conclusion. The dispute over where Prince Harry would spend a single night in the UK might seem, on its surface, like a minor footnote in the long-running story of the royal family. But it sits at the intersection of nearly everything that has defined his relationship with the institution since 2020. An unresolved security battle that has spanned 5 years and multiple courts, a slow and uneven path toward personal reconciliation with his father, and a media environment that scrutinizes his every visit far more closely than the causes he's actually trying to promote. None of this means the relationship is permanently broken, and none of it means reconciliation is imminent either. What the past year has shown is a family relationship inching forward in fits and starts, occasionally punctuated by moments of real warmth, like the Highgrove reunion with his children, and just as often set back by disputes that reveal how much distrust still lingers beneath the surface. If you've been following this story, let us know in the comments what you think really happened with the accommodation, and subscribe for more grounded coverage of the royal family that separates what we actually know from what